Welcome back to the Business of Business podcast, Two Daughters and Their Dad. I'm your host, Staci J. Dempsey. And like always, thankfully, I have the one of the other daughters and the one and only dad. Good morning and good afternoon to the both of you.
Good morning.
Hello, everybody.
And good morning and good afternoon to all of our viewers and our listeners. We're so excited that you have decided to join us. Today, we want to kind of start to unpack, the challenges of hiring new people into your business. What does training look like? Do you have a system to train? Do you have a trainer? Do you even have a system at all? Where are we in that process? And I know that between Dad and Jennifer, we probably have a plethora of stories of the good, the bad, and the indifferent of how getting new people into our business has been wildly successful, and then learning experiences. So let's start it off with the both of you. Challenges that, when you're hiring into your business now. Let's start now because I know with Dad's experience, hiring maybe 30 years ago looks a bit different than it does now. So let's start the conversation with the two of you on the challenges of hiring people into your business now.
Yeah,
Oh,
I mean, everything, right? Things
Everything.
always change inside of our business. And this topic is no different. Hiring new employees, training new employees inside of your business is always changing. And I have made some changes over the last 9 years that I have been hiring new employees. I think the first thing to identify is, do you have a system in place when it comes to hiring employees? And what kind of people are you looking for to come inside of your business? And so for me, I have talked a lot on this podcast about I've changed so many things inside of my business, and this is no different. So I actually took a year off from actually hiring any new hairdressers, meaning hairdressers that have no experience. But I recently just launched a new program inside of my business and hired my first apprentice. And it's so interesting. I was in the salon yesterday with her, working with her, and something happened, guys. I was like having the best day, super inspired. I love doing hair. I love sharing everything that I've learned 16 years of being a hairdresser. And so what I was reflecting on is maybe sometimes we need a break of training. And I'm speaking to the owners of businesses, you personally. We wear so many hats. Sometimes we need to take that training hat off ourselves, take a step back, take a break, and be able to envision really what kind of training system we want inside of our business, take time to lay that out, look for a certain type of person, and perspective can change overnight. So, like anything else, if something is not working inside of your business, we can't be afraid to change it, right? So, sometimes change is good inside of businesses.
well, most times change is good ultimately, because, without it, we don't have growth. We don't have, change just drives so many positive things. We don't always look at it that way, but in reality, that is the case because it's what drives vision. It's what drives innovation. It's what drives courage. It's what drives, thinking outside the box. I mean, just so many different things. But when it comes to hiring, I mean, and again, I think for our listeners, always start with, what is my business? What type of business do I have? Meaning what type of employees do I need? In Jennifer's case, Stacy's case, myself, in most cases, we're going to need employees there's going to be a significant investment of time and energy into training, into education, into licensing, to all those things. Where there's other businesses, again, it's going to be less about that. It's going to be more about bringing that person on, let them start, and again, it could be in the food industry or all kinds of things that, again, certainly a level of training that has to happen in every situation, but it's much less onerous than, the businesses that we're running. So always identifying that because again, you know, it also determines the type of employee that you're going to need to pursue. Because obviously, in some businesses we can entrepreneurs can utilize a younger workforce, knowing that this is never going to be their career. It's not the jobs that they offer aren't career jobs. They're more entry level into the workforce. So you're dealing with college or, older high school or those young tweens, type of thing. But, you know, but if you have a business that requires what we need, hiring is something that is very challenging, and understanding, you know, first of all, when do I need to make that hire? When do I need to make the next hire? And keep that in focus, because the learning curve to get them to where they're actually effective in their position, has a long view. I mean, it can be months, if not years. I know for us in many of our roles, I mean, to have someone truly up and running with confidence in their position, is a few years, really, not a few months, so that's just an incredibly important component to understanding that type of hire that you need to make. And then when it comes to making understanding the hiring process, then really having a good process to hire someone, in terms of where are you seeking talent? Where are you looking for that talent? Different, whether it's, LinkedIn or, Indeed or, personal referrals, whatever it may be. But, you know, you really want to make sure you're vetting a very strong hiring process. And so, I mean, it's a big deal, and then, once you make that hire, then you're in, and, then the key is, where do you go from there with training, and do you have a system for that? So it's significant, the whole hiring, training, bringing people on, building your staff, building your team. It's critical, but it's a challenge, big time.
I think for me, when we talk about hiring, the important thing for entrepreneurs to know is don't wait until you're absolutely in need. So if we constantly have that thought process that we're always hiring, or the opportunity is always there, it's always kind of in the back of your mind. So maybe you're not actively recruiting at this moment, but you're always open to it, right? You're going after the type of employee that you want, that you think is going to fit that job the best. And so when you have that type of mindset, you avoid that last minute type of mindset where all of a sudden, you go into work one day and you got 3 employees ready to resign, and now you're in crap. What am I going to do? I have no one to fill these positions. So you want to try and come from a place of strength when it comes to hiring with that in mind. Also, I used to always so that's what I used to do, right? I used to wait until there was a position, wait until there was a need. And now, we're constantly just looking for who is the best fit, and kind of going after that. With that in mind, you can hopefully always make room for kind of that next hire inside of your business. And then, comes after that is the training piece. Most times, doesn't matter what type of business you have, if you're onboarding new employees, you have to have some type of training system in place. And before we hit record, I was sharing with the podcast that it's comical because I used to think that I was the best person to train new employees inside of my business until, one day one of my employees is like, maybe I should take over this for you. And I started thinking, yeah, I mean, as a business owner, we wear so many hats, and being able to evaluate, are you the best person to be training new employees? Is there someone else in your business that could be training someone? Maybe there's multiple people inside of your business that can take on different roles. And for me, I have figured out that the onboarding, maybe when you bring on a new employee and you want them to understand your culture and your expectations and kind of that day to day, how does the business operate? Maybe there's one employee that's really great in that training. And then when we hands on shampooing, understanding client relations and things like that, there might be a different employee inside of your business that's best for that role. And then when we get into really the craft of doing hair, maybe that's when it's time for the best of the best to step in and do that role. So, looking at your business and saying, what are our options here? How can we spread this out? And what I have learned from training so many people is not everyone is going to understand the way that I train, right? Everybody has different learning ways of how they learn, maybe more hands-on, maybe more technical, book work. So having multiple people help with the training process really can benefit your business and that new employee in different ways. And when you have your employees invested, what's really great is that you start to get feedback. Hey, listen, Jen, I know you got high hopes for this one. I don't think they're going to cut it, right? Or you know what? I think if we can just work with this person a little bit more, I think they're gonna get it. They have potential. I see the potential. Everybody's invested, and it just works better, in my opinion, in my business, better, that way.
Well, I like what you said, the whole thing, but a couple of the things that really jumped out at me was, you know, depending on your team and, you know, identifying who is the best to train on certain areas, in certain areas, on certain topics, maybe again, identify those strengths and then have them train on that rather than one person potentially having, unless they are a full time trainer, which most of our entrepreneurs are probably not going to have full time trainers. You're going to rely on your existing team to do that training so that's a great point. And the other one was coming from a position of strength. And that's where it gets hard because, how do you do that? We're constantly looking at where are we vulnerable? Where are we, because it's not just hiring for growth, but if you start to get some people in your business that are key people that do a lot, and then you realize how much you're relying on them in those areas and nobody knows what tomorrow is going to bring, and next thing you know there's something that takes them out of work for a while, then you're like, oh my, I don't have anybody ready to step in to do their job and and know how to do it, so but you also probably can't afford to cover every contingency out there. You can't have a backup employee in just every single area. So just analyzing maybe your most vulnerable places, that if you lost someone, make sure you try to have some type of plan for that. I think is good. And but you're right, Jen. Always be trying to hire and bring people on, and not be forced into it from some type of crisis scenario. Then now I got to go hire because you know this happened, and the learning curve's a couple years, and and you've got business momentum going. That's like, wow, that nothing's going to stop that momentum than having some key people leave for whatever reason, whether it's voluntary or involuntary. So Jen, so when somebody doesn't, you hire someone, you go through all that. I mean, then you lose them early on for whatever reason. What kind of analysis do you put on that in looking back?
That's such a loaded question, Dad, because really what I want our listeners to ask themselves is, you have a training system in place and then you wake up one day and you think, this is just not working for me anymore. Why? Because my training system I'm investing so much time, money, resources, products into it, and I'm not getting my investment back. And I make that very clear inside of my business. If I'm going to invest, come on, people, we only invest to get something back, right? That's what investment is. So at some point through the system I used to have, I did not feel like I was getting a return on my investment. And that's when I said, you know what? This is not working for me anymore. And so I have to make a change, but I don't know how. And sometimes that's a good place to sit inside of your business, because then, like you said, it brings creativity. It really brings to the surface, what do I want? What does the business need? How do I want this to look? Do I want to be more hands off? Do I want to be more hands on? What is what is disconnecting that I'm not getting to the finish line with this process? And so, for me, changing everything, I've just been so very clear. And I think, Dad, you actually gave me this advice early on, and I might say it wrong, but you always have told me hire slow and fire quickly. And I was not good at that. I always, and again, you guys have to remember who I am, right? I'm a hairdresser. I'm creative. I love people. I see potential. Sometimes I want it more than they want, right? So I was not good at that. And so until I got burnt out and I said, I have to get good at this. And so I just changed everything about the system that I was using. And like I said, then I went only to hiring experienced hairstylists, which brought on a whole new curveball for me because there's a beauty on kind of hiring maybe right out of school or somebody younger because you do have that ability to mold somebody and train them without having to break bad habits or break old habits. And so maybe there's different types of employees inside of your business, like me, like you guys, and you have kind of that piece of, bringing in new talent and then having experienced talent. And those are two different job roles inside of your business. But one thing I want to make sure I tell you guys is that when I was hiring new talent, I was so stressed out because my business depended on it, right? So if I lost new talent the day, the week, the business fell apart. So what I had to smarten up and think, I can't depend on this anymore, right? I can't, meaning the only way our business works is if we have someone helping shampooing, helping to sweep, keeping the salon running. And if this person calls out sick, quits last minute, then everything blows up in my face. And I couldn't operate that way anymore. So that was another reason why I changed everything. So going back to figure out what roles do you have inside of your business? What kind of talent, what kind of people do you need? Maybe that's two different hiring processes for you, two different training processes. I know it is for me. I love experienced hairstylists because what I decided to do was give up micromanaging. I'm not good at it. I don't like to do it. And so I'm going to let them experienced hairstylists. I'm going to hire them. I'm going to teach them the culture, the day-to-day operations, and I'm going to let them fly. But I'm going to have a weekly phone call with them. We're going to be checking in with them. We're going to be correcting their mistakes. But I'm going to give them freedom and I'm going to act more as a mentor instead of a micromanager. And all that did was give me freedom. And if whatever that employee needs from you, then they come to you and say, hey, I need this, I need this, I need this. That's a whole different ball game than what I'm talking about. New talent, new employees, hairdressers that are just out of school that know nothing. Two different employees, two different training processes. And I know you guys have that too, Dad. You guys have different employees inside of your business too.
Well, we do, and I want to go back to that. If you lose someone early on, the analysis. I mean, we have recently had that experience, where we decided to bring on, another customer service rep in preparation for what were seeing, into the future of some of our experienced talent, probably, retiring over the next few years and that type of thing. And so we went through the hiring process and hired someone, got them, they got their licensing and then I don't think it was much more than 2 or 3 months later, they resigned. Now, it wasn't anything to do with the position, it's my understanding. It was just more about, two things. One, it sounded like more money. And the second was, the ability to work from home, which again, we offer that on a very limited extent, but not every day. So we just basically lost that person, I think, just to competition in those two areas. So there's nothing I think that we could pinpoint. We sit down. Was there anything we could have done differently in the hiring process? It didn't seem to be a training issue. They were catching on very well and certainly were talented for the job and the position, but it was just that. And I think that's the other thing that's important. Maybe if there's a way to do it in retrospect is, when because we're competing with things today that we didn't compete with a few years ago, mainly being, that remote work, the ability to work from home. It was like, I know when, the COVID hit and everybody was forced to work at home, everybody hated it, and because they were home stuck with the kids all day and that type of thing, but then the kids went back to school and then I was like, I like being here now, so it's a challenge, because some businesses are, still offering that, in their job offers. And, so I think understanding to the best you can how maybe if that's something that you don't offer, but, the candidate, you can sense that's going to be important to them. That's a risk you're going to take, that they could leave you for a position like that. Now, on the financial side, I think that's different. I mean, you know, you have to establish what your pay is for certain positions and based on experience and that type of thing. So, you have to be in the competitive, but, um, so I think the other piece of that didn't pan out here, but always making sure that when you're talking to new people, not only do you talk to them about the package, the compensation package, you know, all that comes with that, remote work, anything that you have to offer there, but also to make sure you communicate career path, that there is an opportunity here within our organization. And we did that, I think, to some extent, but probably hadn't gotten to the point where we were comfortable enough really talking in a meaningful way about career path and where this particular person, we saw her maybe in 5 years and maybe we could have done a better job of that. I don't know if it would have swayed the decision, because, sometimes career path will trump money, if it's a situation to where, they see they have a opportunity to move up and make more money, have, more job satisfaction and that type of thing. But, the position they're taking would be much more difficult, maybe a larger company, you know, career, any advancement's going to require something that you maybe wouldn't want to do, move, that type of thing. So, but making sure you're talking about, potential career path, I think is helpful as soon as you sense that that's a good conversation to really, it's always good to introduce in the hiring process, but then to kind of validate it, once you get that person, that could definitely be the piece that helps retain an employee and keep them from, out there looking around, for other things. So big challenges though. It's a big challenge.
Big
That
challenges, and at times it can very much be a roller coaster. And just to kind of close out this topic, I know for myself, in my nonprofit life, one of the things that we have learned 100% through trial and error. Lots of errors in the last few years on hiring, with the team that there is now, specifically listing out the needs of what each position has in the organization. And, our new ED we knew we needed a chef. So rather than saying, hey, we need a chef, we list out all the duties that person needs to do. And what has now worked was in that hiring process going, listing out all these responsibilities and the gentleman going, so it sounds like you need a chef. Yes. Okay. We're on the same page. And, so us going back and saying none of this has worked out very well. This has been very like the roller coaster of emotions, but now we're on to something. And that's just been something that has worked, in the last 3 hires very successfully in my nonprofit life. But nevertheless, in 5 years, this will all probably change anyway, or in another year anyway. But I think that today we share a lot of good information. And so I want to thank all of our viewers and listeners for tuning in and dialing in with us today. And hopefully we will see you guys soon in our next episode. Bye-bye.